Radical left movement to destroy America's heritage is in full force in recent weeks, with militant protesters turning their attention to tearing down historical statues across the country. They claim their goal is to remove racist monuments from public places, but in their ignorance, they're also destroying statues dedicated to abolitionists, black heroes, and even freed slaves themselves. In Boston, thousands of protesters swarmed the streets, attacking the Robert Gould Shaw and the 54th Regiment Memorial as a piece of racist history. Ironically, the monument is dedicated to the first black volunteer regiment of the Union Army in the Civil War. After President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, 1,000 black men signed up to fight for their freedom, and the monument is a tribute to their struggle. And in Duluth, Minnesota, amazingly, protesters also vandalized the Clayton Jackson McGee Memorial, which was dedicated to the memory of 3 black men who were lynched after being wrongly accused of rape. Even a statue of Mahatma Gandhi was defaced outside the Indian Embassy in Washington, D.C., and in Denver, Colorado, a memorial for the victims of the Armenian genocide was vandalized with anti-cop graffiti. Protesters also defaced and tore down statues dedicated to those who fought for the freedom of slaves as well. In Philadelphia, rioters turned their hatred toward the statue of abolitionist Matthias Baldwin, spray painting colonizer and murderer on the monument. Baldwin was actually an outspoken critic against slavery and fought for the rights of black Americans to vote. In Wisconsin, rioters destroyed the statue of Hans Christian Heg that stood in front of the Capitol. Heg was an immigrant from Norway who became a vocal critic of slavery. He fought in the Union Army and was killed leading a charge against the Confederates, literally giving his life to fight for the freedom of African Americans, and the protesters tore down his statue. Another statue of a man who fought against slavery was torn down was that of Ulysses S. Grant in San Francisco. Grant was given a slave before the war, but freed the man in less than a year in 1859, claiming that slavery was a stain on the Union. Grant then went on to help defeat the Confederates, fought against the KKK, appointed African Americans into high-ranking government roles, and is now known as one of the greatest champions of African American civil rights, including helping pass the 15th Amendment, giving blacks the right to vote. Even a statue of President Abraham Lincoln in Boston is under attack, with protesters claiming it's racist. The statue features Lincoln standing over a freed slave, urging him to rise up, and holding a copy of the Emancipation Proclamation in one hand. And, according to the National Park Service, the statue is a copy of one in D.C., which was paid for entirely by freed slaves.
The protests over police brutality against black people across the country can trace their roots to this nation's history of racism. Journalist Nicole Hannah-Jones won the 2020 Pulitzer Prize for commentary as the creator of the 1619 Project for the New York Times.
In the fall of 2019, the New York Times unveiled the 1619 Project, this kind of sprawling special issue commemorating the 400th anniversary of the year African slaves were first brought to American shores. 1619 was the brainchild of star journalist and MacArthur genius Nicole Hannah-Jones. It claimed to be this daring deconstruction of America.
This anniversary is the reason we even exist as a country. We would not be the United States were it not for slavery.
Look across all these aspects of modern day society and see the legacy of slavery. All of this kind of goes back to that original sin.
We were founded not as a democracy, but as a slaveocracy.
The central reason for the establishment of the United States of America was freedom. Freedom to enslave Africans.
Curriculum is actually being taught in every state in the country, more than 80 cities. The educators were willing to tear up how they had planned their curriculum to teach this.
It has the authority of the New York Times behind it, and yet could be so wrong in so many ways.
The Times eventually offered up a fake correction that just some of the founders wanted to protect slavery. The first anti-slavery meeting in the history of human civilization takes place in Philadelphia. Key framers denounced slavery as an abhorrence, as barbarism.
What 1619 postures is that all of the problems facing inner city blacks are attributed to factors that are external to that community. Explain to me how institutional racism could cause black people to fail in systems run by their own people. Tell me how that works. Nothing is more lethal to a people than to convey to them that it's impossible for them to be agents of their own uplift.
They know that if they can force you to watch as they topple your heroes, they have won. There's nothing they can't do next. They can decide how you raise your children, how you vote, what you're allowed to believe. Once they've humiliated you, they can control you. And that's why, across the country, mobs are tearing down America's monuments.